In the last class, we were discussing something called as a throws, and we said that if we know already that if some method is going to raise some exception, then instead of writing a try catch block, that means if you don't have anything to be done with respect to catch block, in that scenario you can go with a throws keyword. So after the throws, whatever exception you are going to expect it from that particular method, all those exceptions can be listed, right? So we have a clearly differentiated when to go with writing a try catch block and when to go with writing just a throws block, right? And most of the times try catch will be preferred when compared to throws. And if you have a scenario wherein which you don't want to write anything with respect to catch block, in only those scenarios, just to surpass a JVM, saying that I am aware that there will be some exception with respect to this method, just to surpass your JVM compiler, you will be going with respect to throws keyword, right? Right. So today's topic, we need to discuss what is called as a finally block, right? So have a clear, so means first we need to understand what is the purpose of a finally block. Then we need to understand what is the means how exactly we can use that particular finally block, right? Now before we start with the explanation like what all the, how to use this particular final and all, so let us understand a small scenario, right? So scenario in the sense, whenever you are writing any programs with respect to Java or any other platforms, when you want to work with a database, right, you will be having application at one end and a database will be at the other end, right? So now what happens is, once you want to establish a connection to the DB, right, so database will be there, it's separate, and your application will be separate. Okay, now every time you will be doing a certain steps. I'll not write an exact code, I'll just write some pseudo code. Say for example, you will be saying DB is nothing but a database. You will establish a connection first for the database, right? So once you establish a connection, you will be performing operations, whatever the operations you wanted to do with respect to database, you will be performing all those operations. Later, once it is done, all your operations has been done, you will be writing a something called as a db.close. That means you are closing a connection whichever you have established, right? So this is not only with respect to a database. In a most of the scenarios, generally if you have used any IDEs like Eclipse or NetBeans, even for a scanner object also, you will be first writing a open. That means opening a scanner object. That means once you create object of a scanner, so that will be having a scanner.open will be done, right? So later it will pop you a message saying that there should be a scanner.close need to be done, right? So either it is a database connectivity or a scanner connectivity. What you are going to do is at the end, that means after finishing all your operations, you will be doing a something called as a cleanup process, right? What I mean to say is, once you are using a something with respect to a Java, once you are establishing some connections with respect to Java, after your operations, you have to perform what is called as cleanup, right? Generally, this particular cleanup process will be written in a block called a finally, right? What I'm saying is, generally this particular kind of a cleanup process will be written under a finally block, right? So now let me tell you how exactly the finally block will look like, right? So if once again, if you had a try block, what is a try block will be having? It will be having instructions which will be expecting some risk factor to be done. That means there might be some risk with respect to these particular instructions, right? So those instructions you will be writing under a try block, right? If a try, so means if there is a risk, that means if there is some exception with respect to try, you will be having a catch block written, right? So these are the things we have seen, right? So it will be having a something like a right, it will be having alternatives. If a risk happens, what has to be done, right? Now if you have a situation wherein which whether a try is having a risk or not, whether a catch is handling that particular issue or not, I wanted to execute few instructions, right? So what I mean to say is, let me repeat my statement once again. So what I'm saying is, whether a try is having some risky statements or not, and whether a catch is executing a few instructions or not, if you have an intention of executing a few instructions, those instructions need to be written in a finally block, right? So let me relate you the things with respect to scenario, right? So I was telling something with respect to a DB connection. Now if I write try DB connection, that means I am trying to establish a connection to the DB. Yes. Now if it is done, that means if it is able to establish a connection, I will perform some operations. Few operations I will perform, either retrieving or putting the data into a DB, whatever it is there, I will perform these operations. Now here I will perform a db.close. That means I am closing my connection to the database. Clear? Understand the scenario. If you are clear with this particular scenario, you can easily understand what is the purpose of a finally block, right? Now what I'm saying is, connection has been established, few operations has been done, and a close DB close has been written. Now scenario is, say for example, if there is an exception raised here while performing some operations, if some exception raised here, right? Now once there is an exception, right? So once there is an exception, does the db.close will execute? No, right? If there is exception, ultimately the control will be given to a catch block, right? So now what happens is, catch block has been executed with respect to some exception. Clear? That means operations during the performing operation, during the process of performing a few operations, there is a sudden exception has been occurred, right? When an exception occurs, the control will be given to a catch block. Are you able to close your DB connection? No, not possible. Now let us assume one more scenario. Okay, you are saying that in a try block, I am not supposed to write this particular closing of a DB, right? So what I'm saying is, when you are closing a DB connection means you are performing some cleanup process, right? When you are closing some connection established means you are performing some cleanup process. Now what I'm saying is, can we write that particular cleanup process instructions in a try block? Right? So that is a question. Can we write instructions related to the cleanup process under a try block? If we write, there will be a problem. What is the problem? Before that particular cleanup instruction, if there is an exception, control will be given to a catch block and a cleanup process will not happen. Clear with the first scenario? Now, okay, so you are saying that when there is an exception, control will be given to a catch block, so that is not feasible to write a cleanup process instructions in a try block, right? So now let me do one more thing. I will erase this instruction. I will write an instruction here. Now what we are doing? We are doing a cleanup process under a catch block. Right? We are doing a cleanup process under a catch block now. What does it mean? Okay, so you try executing all the instructions in a try block. If there is an exception, come to a catch block and close this particular cleanup. Is this a feasible now? Can we write instructions something like this? Will it handle, whether our whether our program will be in a stable state if we are writing instructions something like this? No. Why? Because when a catch block will be executed, only when exception raised, right? Say for example, if exception has not been raised, what happens? Catch block will not come into existence itself. When a catch block will not come into existence, cleanup process will never happen. Clear? Now, the thing is, either there is a error with respect to try or not, right? If there is a error, right, then also, so means if there is error, ultimately catch block will be executed, right? If there is a no error, I need some common point where I can put this particular cleanup process, right? So what I'm saying is I need one common point where I can put this particular cleanup process. So that particular common point is nothing but this particular finally block, right? So why I'm saying that this particular thing is a common block, in the sense you need to understand when this particular finally block will be executed, right? So point number one, after executing a try block, that means if there are no errors with respect to try block, if there are no errors with respect to try block, ultimately catch block will not be coming into existence, right? So then also finally will be executed, right? If there is a error with respect to try block, if there is a error with respect to try block, then a catch block will be executed. After a catch block, finally block will be executed, right? Now single statement if I want to say is either you have a error or not, either you have error with respect to program or not, right? At the last, finally block will be executed once before closing your application. Shall we see an example? If you have these particular ideas in your mind, then we will see an example. It will give you a better understanding of your finally block. Okay, right. So just to show you one common error. So you might have seen that particular error, but just for a time being, just for understanding in a better fashion, I'll show you that. Now I wrote just a try block and not written anything, any instructions with respect to try block, closed everything, right? So let me just compile this program and cross check what error it might show, right? Java C finally demo dot Java. Yes, what's error it is showing? Error try without a catch, comma finally. That means it is expecting something like a finally block also, right? So first let us see a simple example. I will not be writing any bigger instructions in this, just wanted to show which block has been executed, right? So this is with respect to try block, right? After this I will write catch exception E, catch block has been written. Now, so within this particular catch block, I will write one system.out.println statement just to show that that particular block has came into existence. Catch block, right? After this, finally, system.out.println, right? Now, are there any errors with respect to try block? Are there any errors with respect to try block? You wrote a system.out.println statement, no exception will be raised, everything is fine with respect to try block. Now what will be output? What we have said, your finally block will be executed even though if you don't have any errors with respect to try block, right? If there is an error, then also your finally block will be executed, right? So in this scenario, if I compile my program and execute, what will be output? Try finally. Yes, let us just cross check. Will it show me that particular output or not? Getting the same thing. Now what does it mean? Yes, there was no error with respect to try block, so it didn't went to a catch block. So finally it is executing our finally block. Right. So let us introduce one error. That means one exception with respect to a try block. And just check what might be the situation. Int a is equal to 2 by 0. This is our favorite exception, right? All time favorite exception, right? So now what will be output? Execution starts from a try block. You have created one exception. So will it go to a catch block, or a first finally block will be executed, or a catch block will be executed, or will it execute a try catch finally, or what will be output? Catch finally, right? So let us just cross check whether we are getting that particular output or not. Clear with the things, right? So your finally block will be executed in either of the cases. That means if there is an error with respect to try, then also it will be executed. If there is no error with respect to try, then also it will be executed, right? Question in the chat box. Can't we use only finally with a try? Yes, you can use. See, why you will be writing a catch? You don't want your program to go for abnormal termination. Abnormal termination should not happen, and it should. So means after executing catch block, whatever remaining instructions are there. So from there, it should continue with the process of execution. Right. Now, if you are not writing a catch block, what happens is exception will be raised. So after exception, it will not find any catch block. So it will execute a finally block and it will terminate a process in abnormal way. Right. So according to your question, so you wanted me to remove this particular catch block. So let us remove this particular catch block. Now we have an exception raised. So when an exception has been raised, so it will be looking for a catch block. So you have not done any catch block with respect to a program. Compilation, no problem with respect to compilation during the running C. Right? Even though when you have created exception, so first a finally block will be executed, then only it will be going for a abnormal termination. Right? So whatever might be the situation, finally block will be executed before a termination of your program abnormally or normally. Right. So in the same lines, Brahan has also asked one question whether a finally block is independent with respect to try or what. So what does it mean is what happens if we are just writing this particular finally block without writing any try catch blocks, right? So let us just cross check. Will it show the output, or will it say something like a try need to be there? Without writing a try, you cannot go with the finally or what? What's error it is showing now? So it is showing finally without error. That means you have to write a try statement, then only there should be a finally. That means without trying anything, you are telling the system to do something finally, right? So it says that you try something, you put some instructions with respect to try. If those things are not going to happen, then only I will execute some finally block. Clear with the things?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Shall we proceed further? Right. So now we have to discuss one important difference. Then we will discuss one more topic with respect to finally. What the important difference I wanted to make you clarity is, in the most of the times in the interviews, you will be getting a question something like this. What is the difference between finally, finalize, that means first one is the final, finalize, finally, right? So this is a question. So means they will ask you, can you just differentiate what is the difference between final, finalize, finally? Do you remember these things? We have discussed the final and finalize also. Huh. Your final, it is keyword, where you will be using this particular final keyword. You will be using this particular final keyword with respect to your variable, right? With respect to your method, with respect to your class, right? So why you will be using this particular keyword? If you have a requirement wherein which you don't want to allow for the changing the values, then you will be making that particular variable as a final. If you don't want a method to be overridden, then you will be making a method as a final. If you don't want a class to be extended, then a class will be made as a final. This is with respect to final keyword, right? Then finalize. Do you remember when we have used this particular finalize? Where we have used a finalize method. If you remember, while discussing garbage collector, garbage collection. While discussing a garbage collection, we said that before taking out a memory from the object, right, it will execute a method called a finalize, right? So we said something like a last wish of object will be something. So that particular last wish will be fulfilled by this particular finalize method, right? Finalize is the method with respect to garbage collection, and that method will be executed whenever there is a object to be destructed. That means whenever you are taking a memory out of that particular object, that means whenever you are destroying an object, before destroying an object, finalize method will be executed. Clear? Now finally is the block, right? Finally is the block which will be used with respect to exception handling, and this particular finally block will be executed with respect to try. If there is an exception in a try, then also finally will be executed. If there is no exception with respect to try, then also finally will be executed, right? If someone asks you, are you in a position to explain it till this point, like what is the purpose of all these three things? In the last class also we have given us something like this differentiation: throw, throws, thrown. I said the thrown is not there with respect to Java, right? So in today's class we are discussing final, finalize, and finally. Final is a keyword, finalize is the method, finally is the block, right? So this you have to remember. Don't use a final with respect to this curly means common brackets, and don't use a finalize as a block by writing a just a curly braces, right? Final is a keyword, finalize is the method, finally is the block. Clear till this point? If you are clear, a small acknowledgement in the chat box, then we will see us one more important point with respect to finally block. Right. With respect to finally block, we need to discuss one more important concept, which is called as return versus finally. Oh, how these things are related. Return is the keyword with respect to method, right? Return is the keyword which you will be using with respect to method. When you will be using, what is the purpose of return? Yes, when a method want to return something, then you will be using the return, right? Once you use a return keyword, control will be given to whom? Calling a method. Whoever has called that particular method, so value will be given to that particular calling the method. Now, why we are discussing a return with respect to finally? Let us understand one example now. Say for example, if I wrote a try statement, right, something like this: system dot out dot println, say try. Sir, finally blocks execute even if there is continue and a break statement in a try block. Could you explain this, please? That only we are explaining. First, let me go with the return. Then you can easily relate it with. You can easily relate these things with respect to continue and the break. Right. Okay, so now what I'm saying is, after writing this particular system.out.println, I can write a return statement, right? I can write a return statement, right? So with respect to return, I may not be returning any value, but just I am writing a return because my method is not expecting any particular type. It is just saying a void. Void means you can write anything, any statement can be written. Right. So if it was a int main, then I have to write a return followed by some number. Okay. So now how execution will happen? If I try to execute my program now, it will go to a try block first. System.out.println try will be printed. Later you wrote a return statement. Return in the sense control will be given back to a calling method. Who is a calling method for this particular block? Who is the calling method? Means in which method you are writing a return statement. You are writing a return statement in a main method, right? Who is the parent of this particular main? JVM, right? So what happens is, when I am writing a return statement, once it encounters a return statement, control will be given back to my JVM, right? Is it a feasible scenario? Can we allow it to do something like this? What was our purpose? Our purpose is either it is a normal execution of a try block or abnormal execution of a try block. Once I need to finish a execution of a finally block, right? So in this scenario, if you are writing a return statement, the control will be given back to your main method. That means the calling method of a main, that means a JVM, right? So in this scenario, will it go to a finally block and then it will go to a return, or how exactly the things will work? Are you understanding my question? Right? So now if I execute a program and I show you output, can you come to a few conclusion, some conclusion? Conclusion one, if you are getting only try in output, if you are just getting only try, finally block has not been executed, right? Control has been given to a JVM. This is one output scenario. Second output scenario, if I am getting a try followed by finally, then what does it mean? Okay, so return has come. So when there is occurrence of a return statement, it is not a going to a main method. That means it is not going to a calling method directly. It is executing a finally, then only it is going to its parent method. Clear with both the conclusions? Shall we check which conclusion will be proper, which conclusion is a proper, which conclusion is not a proper? Yes. Now let me just compile fine. What are the statements you are getting? Try followed by finally. Then what does it mean? It means that if there is a some control need to be given back, right? So if you have a scenario wherein which you have to give a control to be given back to a calling method, right? Whatever a scenario wherein which you want to give a control back to the calling person, right? In those scenarios, finally block will be executed, then only the control will be given back, right? So within a scope, wherever you wrote a finally, in that particular scope, first a finally will be executed before you come out of that particular scope. Clear with the things? If you are clear with this example, I will write one more example. You should predict what might be the output of that. Right? Let me write an example. It will take a small time, so just bear with me. Right, so example is something like this. I have a catch block also, right? So with respect to a catch block, I wrote some return some number, right? So let this particular thing, let it return some 777. Let this particular here also, let me have a catch block statement. Catch finally is also, it have a return value. Yes, it can have some return statement written 999. Right. So now let me just 1 second. I will close my main method here. So within a main method, I will put all these try statements into some other method, something like public static int m1. This is some user defined method. So within this particular method, I am writing these statements. Right? I'll tell you what are the things I have written. System dot out dot println of I will call a method called m1. Right? So let us understand what are the things we have done. We have a one main method written and we have a one normal m1 method written. So in a m1 method, we have just written a one try block, one catch block, and a one finally block. With respect to all the three blocks, you have a return statements, something like this: 777, 888, 999. Right. So now from the main method, I am calling a method called a m1. I can directly call it without creating object because I have made a method as a static. Right? I am using the static method, so no need to go with the object creation and calling that particular method. So I can directly write a m1. Right? So return type of this m1 is an integer because all these blocks will be returning some integer value only. Now, when I call a m1, right? So what might be the output of my program? When a m1 method has been called, it will go to this particular m1. You have a try block with respect to this particular m1. System.out.println statement will be executed. Try will be printed on the screen. After that, you have a something called as return 777. Right? So according to our previous example, what we have said, once it encounters a return statement, so ultimately it will be going to the finally block for the execution. Right? It will not go to its parent, whoever is calling that particular method, right? So what it will do, it will go to the finally block, right? So in a finally block, what we have written, system.out.println finally. That means finally block will be executed, right? So after executing a finally block, what you have again return statement, return 999. Right? Now, what will happen? Will it be in a continuous loop with respect to a finally block, or what will be returned to this particular main method? That means what will be a return value of this particular m1? Shall we just cross check what will be output of this particular program? Understood a program? Initially, I have put a one return statement in only in a try block. Now I have put a return statements in all a try, catch, and a finally block. Right? Now I just wanted to check which particular return will be will be having a more priority, or which return statement will be a valid one. Right? So previously I wrote a return statement only with respect to try, and I said that before going to a calling a method, it will execute this particular finally block, then it will return the value. This is what I said. Now what I have done is I have a return statement with respect to all the three. With respect to try also one return statement, with respect to catch also one return statement, with respect to finally also one return statement is there. Now which return statement will be having a more priority? That is a question. Or which return value will be actually come into existence. Is it clear now? See, if you don't know the purpose, means if you don't know intention of this particular program, it will be a waste to explain output. So I am just waiting for acknowledgement. If you understood what is the purpose of doing all these modification, then I will execute a program. Okay, so I got a message in the chat box written 19,999 maybe. Okay, so you are feeling that finally block will be given a priority. That means the content of a finally written will be a final written value. Okay, so let us just cross check now. Compiled find which written value has been considered. Try was having a 777 that has not been considered. Finally has got a 999. So it went to through a try block, executed a try statement. Once it encounters a return statement, it went to a finally block. Finally block executed. From there return was written, so it came to a main method back. Right. So what was the return with respect to a finally block? That is the finally value which has been given. Right. So can I come to a conclusion saying that if you are writing a return statement in a 3 blocks, whatever a return statement you have written in a finally block, that will be having a more priority. Ultimately, that will be considered. Question may be asked, sir, without going to a catch block, how can you come to this particular conclusion? Okay, so let us go to a catch block and then check which one will be given a more priority. How to go to a catch block? Int a is equal to 2 by 0. We know that how to go to catch block. We know better route for this. Right. So try will be printed, exception will be raised, catch will be gone. So once you go to a catch block statement will be printed. You go to a return statement, return 888 has been written. Once it encounters a return statement, it will not go to a parent because you are going out of a scope. So it will go to a finally block will be executed. So with respect to finally, you have a 999. So the return value from that particular method should be a 999, even though if you have a exception raised with respect to try block. This is my argument. Let us just check what will be a answer with respect to this. Clear with the things? Let me give a small conclusion, then I'll take up questions in the chat box. Now what I'm saying is, when you have a return statement, so means returning in the sense giving a control back to the person whoever is calling, right? So which return will be considered means, if you have a return statement in a try block, right? Before executing that particular return, finally block will be executed first, right? After executing a finally block, you will be returned back to your main person, right? So what I'm saying is, if you don't have a return statement written here, if you don't have a return statement written, right? So what will be output of my program? What will be output of my program is, from a try you have a created exception. When you have a created exception, will it go to a catch block? Yes, it will go to a catch block. In a catch block, it will execute this particular catch and it will return this particular statement. That means once it encounters this particular return, what will happen? It will go to a catch block, finally block first, finally block will be executed, then only this particular statement will be executed, right? So in this scenario, what I have done is, I have removed return statement with respect to finally block. So let us just cross check what will be output. Oh, I didn't save the file. Sorry. What's happening? Try is going, then there was an exception with respect to try, so it went to a catch. So after executing a catch, there was a return statement. So before executing a return statement, it has to execute a finally. It has executed a finally block. Then whatever has been written statement with respect to catch, that has been executed. Clear? Now, say for example, I don't have any problem with respect to this particular exception. That means I don't have an exception itself in a try block, right? So now what will be output? It will go. It will come to a return statement of a try. So once it encounters a try, it will say that okay, so I cannot go back to my parent directly. So I have to execute a finally block first. So let me execute a finally block, then execute a return statement. This is what it will say to a JVM, right? So now, if I execute this particular statement, so compile a fine, right? Try executed a finally, whatever a return statement was there with respect to try, that has been executed. Clear with the stuff? Clear? Yes. Now let us just cross check what are the points that are there with respect to a PPT very fast. That means we have discussed most of the things, just revising. It's a sort of a revision for us. Hope this is visible. Right. Finally creates a block of a code that will be executed after a try catch block has completed and before the code following a try catch block. Right. So after executing your try catch block, that particular finally will be executed. Syntax of this one is something like this. Try will be having some risk code, then a catch will be having a risk handled, and finally will be having some cleanup activities, whatever you wanted to do. The finally block will execute whether or not an exception is thrown, right? So this we have clearly specified. If there is an exception with respect to try, then also finally will be executed. If there is no exception with respect to try, then also finally will be executed, right? If an exception is thrown, the finally block will execute even if no catch statement matches the exception, right? So this case I have not written. It is saying something like you have written a try statement, but there is no suitable catch block for that. So then also it will be executing your finally block, then only it will terminate your program. That in an abnormal fashion, right? If a try block contains return statement, then finally block will be executed before terminating the return. That means before it executes a return statement, first a finally block will be executed, then only it will go to a return statement, right? So we have seen examples supporting all these statements, right? See, if I go through only statements, I have 3 statements here because this one is just a syntax. I have 3 statements. With respect to these 3 statements, we have seen almost some 4 to 5 programs. That means modified versions of each program. Okay, so this is about finally, and that finishes your third module, that is exception handling. That means with respect to third module, we have discussed the string handling and exception handling. Okay, so if you have any questions with respect to finally block, you can post those questions in a chat box. And one more important thing with respect to second internals, the portions is till packages. That means we have to discuss 2 more important what I mean to say important topics. One is the interfaces and another one is the packages. So till packages it will be there for internals. If you have a syllabus copy, later you just cross check till packages means how much a portion. It starts from for a first internal we have kept a 1.5 module, right? So after that means second off of a second module. From second off of a second module till packages you have for your second internals. Sir, when you are going to teach us scanner, we will do it tomorrow itself. Tomorrow we have a Saturday lab session, right? So during that time we will take a 30 minutes for understanding the input output, then we will see this. For internals, for second internals, right? Second unit, second half from this particular point. That means topic is inheritance. From inheritance, that means from this particular point, from your second unit, second half, that is from inheritance to now we are done with our third unit, right? Okay, so fourth unit to fourth unit packages, right? So this is your portion for your second internals, from inheritance till packages. So with respect to fourth unit, we have to discuss 2 important topics. One is interfaces and another one is the packages. Sir, will the second internal also lengthy like a previous one? Maybe. Internal dates, they have said from 19 internals will start. 10 days more. Right. So now don't worry about this particular, simply I introduced this particular topic. Any questions with respect to finally block? What about first internals result? With respect to first internals, valuation has been done, but they said like not to disclose the marks now itself. So I don't know when they will tell to disclose us the marks. When they tell us to disclose, then we will disclose. Marks are ready. Right. So if you don't have any questions with respect to finally, you can leave the session. Thanks for your time. Have a nice day.